Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Russian summer offensive is in full swing. Everyone is reporting that Pokrovsk is done for. There is fighting in Sumy and Russia is capturing everything and everywhere. Is it really the case? I don't really think so. But let's look at the situation on the ground and I'm going to explain what's happening and what our perspective going forward at this current time. So I'm really glad being back from Ukraine, seeing the situation on the ground, talking with the military and understanding a lot more nuance. I'm going to talk about many other things in the videos to come. There's going to be content pump a little bit coming this week and the next. And overall, the most important thing that we need to talk about starting with is perspective. Not only me, but some of the other analysts like Ukraine Control Map over here, they underscored the most critical thing to always remember when we're looking at the situation and the map, when we're talking about Russia capturing territory in Ukraine, is the scale. Ukraine is massive. Ukraine is really huge. And very often when we talk about Russia capturing this village or that, encircling one city or another, it's always critical to understand what is the actual scale, because the attrition warfare is not really beneficial for Russia. They already lost majority of their equipment. Just some recent reports are stating that some of their more advanced tanks are pretty much exhausted and they have only left some of the older variants. But even beyond that, even if we consider that Russia might use some kind of other tactics and adapt to the situation on the ground, when we actually look at the data and we look at the numbers and look at, for example, visual representation of what Russia has actually achieved in the last 3.5 years, then you see that this not really look that impressive, especially knowing how much effort and losses Russia has actually put in these efforts. Now, on this map, it's very clearly seen with the bright red marker, like the line bright red, right, is the current line of contact between Russia and Ukraine. And then with a pale red, you can see the line of contact between Russia and Ukraine in 2022 prior to full-scale invasion. So when you look at this from afar, from the zoom out perspective, what I often try to convey on this channel, then you're like, yeah, that doesn't really look that great for Russia. And this is the most crucial to always keep in mind as we're going to go in depth about the situation on the ground and discuss the major parts here. Now, I want to start with the situation around Pokrovsk, because this is the most crucial part of the front line, and this is what is making the news, because we already hear people claiming that Pokrovsk is done for, that the city is being captured, that Russian forces are already in the city, and it's gonna fall any day now. And if we would to assess what's the situation in Pokrovsk, I would say that Pokrovsk is still okay. It's not fine. Russians are truly having a little bit of success in the northern part. I like to use this map because here there is an option for me to turn the fortifications. So in 3, 2, 1, I will turn the fortifications on. Yeah, it's a bit of a mess, but I'm gonna zoom in so you can see specifically what was happening. Now, the biggest thing that I was looking at here in the north, where the Russia has been advancing recently, is I was looking at the situation specifically in this part, because you can see that there are certain fortification lines that I was hoping would hold Ukraine for a while now. Unfortunately, Russians were able to capture these fortifications, and now they are advancing along the trench line towards the next line of fortifications. And important here to understand is what are the key points of contest here for the Russians. And most important here is a couple of settlements. It is Belitske, it is Rodinske, it is Krasny Liman. Those are the main points of control that Ukrainians want to keep to prevent Russians from moving further around the northern side of Pokrovsk and Mirnograd. They're going to be here on the side. So this is the kind of the ultimate goal here at the bottom for Russians. And if they want to continue encirclement, they need to capture these fortified settlements. There is this fortification line right over here that Ukrainians can hold, and also this fortification line in the middle. So I would be looking at two things. A, whether or not Russia will be able to capture any kind of these settlements fast enough. And second, whether or not Russia will be able to push through into between these settlements towards the more northern part. This is going to be a more challenging area for Russia than going through these settlements. But this is also going to put Ukrainians in a very peculiar positions. As you can see, there is the road here that goes right over here. I'm going to turn off the fortifications just so the screen is not as cluttered. But the main road is right over here for Pokrovsk. Plus there is the side road that goes kind of over here for support. And then there is the main highway that is supporting Pokrovsk here. There is also a network of smaller roads. So supply situation to Pokrovsk is pretty okay. But if Russia is able to advance and essentially cut off this area right over here, then obviously it leaves only this highway supply situation and obviously smaller roads that are around the highway that is going to be supplying Pokrovsk, and it's not going to be a nice way to supply the city anyway, especially with the current Russian drone threat. So that's why the situation is threatening, but it is not critical yet. It will be becoming more bad when Russia is going to be able to capture these settlements and move towards this river right over here. It's still going to take a while for Russia to set their things in there, to bring their drone units forward, to bring their artillery units forward, to actually threaten the supply of Pokrovsk. But in general, so far, situation in the north is not nice, but it's not terrible as well. And as for the south, Russia cannot really advance the south. They really tried doing so, but Ukrainians have established a very efficient control over the southern part of this Pokrovsk Mirnograd agglomeration, and instead Russia is now trying to move around the northern part. It's not going easy for them, and I will show you why, but more importantly, we also got certain reports what is happening within the city. Now, in the last couple of days, Russian Telegram channels have been proclaiming big victory, that supposedly they found a weakness inside of Pokrovsk and they were able to break through to some of the parts, and even some of the more optimistic Russians, they even started coloring some of the streets inside the Pokrovsk city center, which would be unprecedented tempo of advances for Russians inside of any kind of city type of situation. And they were actually so brave that they not only colored their maps and released information that they advanced into the city of Pokrovsk, but they are also released videos of supposedly Russians going into the city and just like casually, more or less, walking in a city, like in a slow tempo. Yeah, I mean, they're doing like some of the checking of the buildings, but this is not how the situation is looking for Russians. Like, there is no drones that are flying there 24/7. And a lot of the Russian Telegram channels called the bullshit and said, guys, what are you doing? We are most definitely not there. There are certain like small recon units that maybe make it out there for a little while and then come back. But there is nothing like our primary units making it to the city center. That is not the situation. But apparently this was what was reported to the Russian command, and that is why it was reported by the Russian Telegram channels, because as soon as the situation was supposedly shown like this, Russians, and I obviously cannot show you this video for certain reasons, but Russians started doing like more mechanized assaults, stating, well, if now we have forward positions in the city, let's go, we're doing so great, let's throw in some more units. And Russians conducted one of the rarer in this current time mechanized stormings of the Pokrovsk city in that direction. Now, as you can see by the red, this is what was happening in the video of Russians' mechanized assault just being completely decimated. It's a very brutal video. Just go into our Discord channel, the Not Safe for Work channel, where we can post these wartime videos, and you can see Russians just being completely obliterated in this attack towards Pokrovsk. And since then, Ukrainian channels have already dismissed any kind of claims by Russians that they entered anywhere deep in the city. There are certain recon groups, of course. I mean, this is a frontline city. There is a fight for Pokrovsk now in full swing. But so far, situation is far from being absolutely critical. Ukrainians are still holding very strong. The northern part situation, we're going to follow that. But at this moment, supplies are coming into Pokrovsk. Russians inside the city are not present. And overall, Ukrainians are defending quite well. Situation south of Pokrovsk in the southern direction. Russian main target here is they want to enter towards this river of Vovcha. And they want to kind of get to that river because river crossing is where Russia is going to struggle the most. Mostly Ukrainians are kind of falling back slowly in this area, and they would like to come back to this more of a natural barrier of this river. There are fights for the settlements in this area, but there is no big center of gravity that Ukrainians are really holding on to. I believe they mostly are trying to just slow down Russian tempo. Then to finish off the southern direction, Russians have conducted some advance around the village of Kamyansky. They are now almost fully in control of it. There is also reports that Russians are also advancing towards the Plavny small settlement, and this is the most direct road for Russians towards the city of Zaporizhia. It's a massive city, but obviously this one advance, despite the fact that on this map you can see the arrows being drawn over here, this is not going very easy for Russians. This is not anything nice. I would not really put a lot of effort just yet for Russians. This one advance is not winning them anything so far, but it's notable that Russia has established themselves across this river right over here. But they were already across the river for a while now. They're just expanding that area a little bit. So nothing to be really worried about over there. Then very quickly covering the situation on the eastern front line. Situation around Toretsk is still relatively stable, bad for Ukrainians. Russians are slowly advancing, and at some point I would expect Russians to do close this pocket. But every time I talk about potentially Toretsk being already fully captured by Russians, it takes them additional 2-3 weeks from what I'm expecting. So Russians are advancing slowly, but in general, Ukrainians are already expecting that Russians will get to Konstantinivka. And now it's not really been a big secret that Konstantinivka has been a big supplies hub for Ukrainian armed forces and like center of operations in the area. And we now got reports from the Russian Telegram channel sources, and so this is not a secret, that Ukrainians are pushing some of their critical units out. So the orders came in for Ukrainians to move their center of operations out of Konstantinivka. Konstantinivka is still not in like any kind of danger zone. There is obviously shelling, there is obviously drone strike in the area, but Ukrainians are just orderly withdrawing and continue the fighting at the new positions. So overall, I would say that Chasiv Yar, Toretsk situation, Ukrainians are realizing that they're potentially getting close to the maximum that they can really get from these areas, and they are giving orders to slowly fall back to the new positions. That is something we can expect. Seventh direction here, Russians try to advance a little bit, they get stopped. It's a very, very tough situation for Russians. I don't want to say that Russians are having any kind of good time there, they don't. And the same can be said for the Liman axis. Russia is able to advance in this area in less relevant areas, so they're not threatening major points. It's not nice that Russia is advancing, but if you would kind of choose the battles you're fighting for, then Ukrainians are fighting the important battles, and the less important battles, yes, Russia is having some advances on. North of Kupiansk situation is developing a little, but it is developing relatively slow. So far, nothing is threatening Kupiansk. This advances north of Kupiansk is not nice, but it is not by itself gonna define any kind of Russian success. We should only look about the situation more precisely, more thoroughly, only when Russians are going to be able to kind of start moving not just north of Kupiansk, but take around Kupiansk and start cutting off some of this logistics towards the southern western area of the settlement. Kupiansk is important because it's pretty much the stronghold to hold all of this Ukrainian forward bridgehead, and if the Kupiansk will be threatened, then obviously this bridgehead will be harder to hold for Ukrainians. But again, so far, nothing really states that Kupiansk is majorly threatened. And then we can take a look at the situation in the north, more specifically in the Sumy region. Now, Sumy region, obviously, Ukrainians have been having a great success here. There has been reports that Kindrativka has been fully liberated. Kindrativka was a very nice settlement because in this one, some of the Russian forces have been encircled for some time, and Ukrainian 225th Separate Regiment has been very successful in liberating some of these areas, despite the fact that Russia has been sending reinforcements in the area. So I want to underscore this. In Sumy direction, Ukrainians were advancing, Russians sent in more reinforcements in the area, yet Ukrainians were still able to liberate this area. This is where Ukrainian strong units are operating. Specifically, I do want to underscore the 225 Separate Assault Regiment. It's a wonderful regiment that has grown in its absolute might power. Right now, it's considered one of the best assault regiments in the Ukrainian military. Importantly, why it's super nice, is that this regiment has been formed after the Russian full-scale invasion, and it was formed from the territorial defense of Kharkiv. Now, Kharkiv, if you don't know, is the city that Russia basically claimed to be the Russian outpost. It says that Kharkiv, as soon as the Russians will just roll in from the Russia towards the city of Kharkiv, they will just welcome them, because supposedly everyone talks Russian in Kharkiv, therefore it's the Russian city. So when Russians came to Kharkiv, they were notably bringing less of the military force and more of a civil suppression force, so like police batons, police riot gear in a lot of their vehicles, and so on. And they got absolutely slaughtered by the Kharkiv territorial defense forces, like just people getting some of their fighting weapons from the stockpiles and just kicking some of the Russian butt. And it's incredible to see that since that time, the territorial defense just stood up for that supposedly Russian city and kicked Russian butt. It's still, since then, grown into one of the most formidable assault regiment in the forces, in the Ukrainian defense forces. Grats to the 225th Assault Regiment. Fantastic job, guys, from Kharkiv. Just another thing to show that it doesn't matter what kind of language one is speaking in Ukraine. Is it Russian? Is it Ukrainian? It doesn't define who do they believe in. They are fighting for Ukraine. They're fighting strongly, and now they're liberating their land from the Russian occupiers. So taking it globally, Russia is advancing in certain areas. Pokrovsk situation is threatening, and we're going to see whether or not Russia will have enough resources until the end of summer to take over Pokrovsk. I have seen how Ukrainians fight beforehand, and usually the command of Ukraine is dedicating more forces towards the stopping of full encirclement of settlement. They usually try to leave and protect some of the last supply roads. And then it is forcing Russians to go into the city and then fight the extremely lengthy fight in the city. So unless Ukrainians are completely exhausted, I don't really believe so. There has been reports recently that European Union was able to fully cover the necessity of Ukrainians, financial necessity of Ukrainians for the weapons. Now, there are certain weapons that European Union cannot supply, specifically the missiles for the Patriot systems. But we must remember that Patriot systems are mostly used in the cities to protect critical infrastructure and civilians from the Russian attacks, rather than attacks in the front line. And so this is something that it is definitely problematic for Ukrainians to have cities undefended, but it is less critical for the front line. For the front line, right now, there are three main weapons that Russia is using to certain success for the front line. Number one, they're using the motorized assaults. So people on the light, fast-moving motorcycles, despite the great losses, they are still able to capture some of the Ukrainian positions just because they're advancing fast and capturing territory. That is just true, and we need to acknowledge that this is happening. Secondly, the aviation bombs. This is something that hopefully we'll see finally develop the countermeasures for in a soon-ish space. There has been promising reports which I haven't seen Russians cover, so I cannot talk about those, but there is potentially a certain solution that will be coming. Specifically, additionally, I can say that the growing fleet of the Ukrainian aviation will present a threat for the Russians, but it is still a problem. And then finally, Russia has started to using their numbers of Shahid production. They've started using these Shahids to target Ukrainian positions, and this is causing trouble. But here again, we're hoping that the scaled production of the interceptor drones for the Ukrainian armed forces will help them deal with some of that Shahid threat at the front line. I'm not the person that is surprised of Russia using Shahids. To be honest, for me, it was more surprising that they were not using Shahids at the front lines rather than they're using this. So I think Ukrainians should have been ready and prepared for this inevitability, to be honest. It's not really rocket science. But more importantly, Ukrainians are well aware that Russia is advancing and they're moving forward into the Ukrainian territory. And some time ago, I talked about that there is like a big new Donbas line that is being built by Ukrainians that is beyond Pokrovsk. So even if Russia essentially captures some of these bigger settlements like Pokrovsk, Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, then there is already major preparations that are ongoing, knowing everything, like putting into these fortifications everything that Ukraine have learned about the modern Russian military and modern Russian tactics. All of the reviews about the fortifications that are being built in the east that I'm hearing right now are positive. Even Ukrainian soldiers that have been stating that the fortification quality has been shit for the last couple of years, they're stating that the new types of fortifications that are being built by Ukrainians are excellent and they're fit for the modern warfare. So great news to hear. Ukraine is still having a little bit of a manpower problem, and I'm really hoping that they will find a solution. But generally speaking, we can see that Ukrainians are learning, they are adapting, and knowing that this fortification line is deeper beyond the Pokrovsk, beyond everything, is just telling me one thing, that no matter how far Russia is advancing, how many villages it captures, even how many cities it might capture, though, again, I would not dismiss Pokrovsk just yet, their war is not gonna end. And this is not gonna suddenly speed up into anything. So by this point, there is over 1 million Russian casualties, so Russia should be ready to get even more of Russians being buried into Ukrainian soil. Ukrainians are not giving up, they're fighting strong, and they are doing an amazing job at that. Thank you so much for watching this video. More videos to come with my fresh perspectives from Ukraine. I love you. Trust in Ukrainian armed forces, support the Ukrainian armed forces, Slava Ukraini, and I will see you next time.